Picky eating, something that parents struggle with across the board. It seems that we have these typically adventurous eaters when they're babies, and then something happens and it starts to shift and parents get worried. I am here with registered dietitians Jessica Penner and Nita Sharda from Happy Healthy Eaters, and they are here to tell us some tips and tricks to help combat that picky eater.
Exactly, Gail. What you said is so true. I think I can count on one hand the number of parents that I've met that haven't struggled with picky eating with their child at some point in time. So for the parents out there, please know that you are not alone.
No, not at all. I've struggled with it as well. And I know the dining room table becomes this battleground where you're trying to negotiate and bribe and barter with your child to get them to eat what you like. So as registered dietitians, what can you share for tips that we can use to help us?
Totally. You know what, right off the hop, the first thing I think that's helpful for parents to kind of recognize and hold on to is that it is totally developmentally appropriate and normal for kids to go through this stage. I mean, when you've got a baby that's transitioning into toddlerhood and those preschool years, something they're really craving is independence and autonomy, and they have a sense of their preferences too. So I think if we couple that with also understanding growth expectations, I mean, your baby's growing so fast in that first year, and then they're still growing after, but it's just not as rapid. So they aren't going to be as biologically inclined to just try all of the food. And so sometimes I think understanding that from the outset can be really, really helpful and prevent some of that clashing that sometimes can happen between, you know, what our idea is of what our child should be eating and how much they should be eating, and then what our child can bring to the table. Because again, that independence is so important for them.
Yes, and we want them to be independent. I mean, it makes so much sense, but as parents, is there nothing we can do? What should we do to help them, or do we just accept that they're picky eaters?
Well, acceptance is a really good first step because that's going to lead to empathy and understanding for our child and essentially really reduce our own stress levels. I think we all know that getting hyped up about any situation is not going to be helpful. But then moving beyond that, there are just so many strategies that parents can use to help foster an interest in new foods with their children.
Accepting it is very hard. So what can we as parents do?
Okay, the very first thing that we want parents to do is to keep serving the foods that their kids are rejecting. Sometimes we can fall into that pattern of leaving those foods off the menu, but if kids are never exposed or given the opportunity to try these foods, interact with them, then they're never going to be able to learn to like to eat them. And so I know for myself, as a registered dietitian, my kids are not immune to picky eating, and I ended up falling into this trap myself. When my kids were babies, I fed them eggs every day pretty much, and as you said, babies they often accept a wide variety of foods. Then toddlerhood hit and they didn't want those eggs anymore. Then one day I realized, I wasn't serving them anymore. So I made a very conscious choice of putting eggs back on the menu. I decided every Monday it's going to be scrambled eggs for lunch and toast. So the first week we went through a lot of bread, not so many eggs, but over time, one boy started to enjoy the scrambled eggs again, and then a little while later, the second one did, and now we all really look forward to scrambled egg Mondays, and it just makes me so happy because eggs are such a nutritious choice for our kids.
Yes, and that's great advice because you're right. Most parents, if they think that their child's not going to eat it anyway, they don't even try. And it's important to just keep showing them the food and getting them used to it and see everyone else enjoys it. And then, hopefully they will too. Speaking of serving, I noticed that when I serve things family style, it seems to go a little bit smoother. The kids are able to take what they want and not take what they don't want, and it just seems like a little bit easier. What do you guys think about family style serving?
Yeah, we love family style dining. We're huge advocates for it, and it's essentially you're putting out all of sort of the main components of the meal at the dining table. If parents don't have a separate dining space, you can leave it on your kitchen island or even on the stove. And with with family style dining, the important thing to keep in mind is that, kids don't get to decide what's on the menu, where they're going to be eating, when they're going to be eating, but if they have an opportunity to choose from what we're planning to serve, it helps to build up that autonomy and independence as well, because they get to decide what they're going to put on their plate, and that can be so supportive for them. I think another really great bonus is that kids get to practice those fine motor skills of sort of picking up ladles and adding things onto their plate, and it really encourages parents to lean into trusting their child, which I know can be really challenging to do at times, but it is so important in that feeding relationship. So we love family style dining.
Yeah, it makes so much more sense. It's like, the kids get to choose what they want and, how much of it they want, where they want it on their plate, rather than getting a plate that's, plated and served to you that way. So it really gives them that involvement and the choice that I think makes them really happy. So getting kids involved in that way, what do you have to say about that kind of exposure?
It can be so beneficial, especially if you do have a child that is a little bit more selective or slow and steady with new and familiar foods. And a lot of parents seem to think that, well, it only counts as exposure if they're tasting or eating the food, but that's not actually true. There's so many different ways to expose children to food, and it could be reading a book. We loved reading The Hungry Caterpillar with our kids and then talking about all the foods that the caterpillar was eating until they became a pretty butterfly. But other things that you can do is just grocery shopping with your child, engaging in food play, and then getting your child involved in the kitchen is so wonderful. I have so many memories of making batter for French toast with my son. I'd get him to crack the egg, whisk it, and dip the bread. And then lo and behold, without all of that pressure, he would start to kind of nibble away at the table and just sort of enjoy it without the pressure. And I think for me, I was so engrossed in making those connections with my kids that I wasn't as hyper-focused on what they were or weren't eating. So it really helped to reduce a lot of that pressure, which again, I think families are feeling like they're inundated with, and this is a great way to kind of loosen that up, is get them involved in the kitchen. Plus, then you've got a kiddo who is growing up with food skills to start with.
Yes, so they can make their own snacks and lunches when they get a little bit older, which is great. We're training them already. This has been really wonderful. It's so challenging when you have a picky eater in the household, and your tips have been excellent. So thank you so much for sharing them with us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having us.